Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer West, and I am the Artistic Director of Muse West Concerts, and I am also the host of this podcast, Take Note. And today I'm situated on the occupied territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. And one of the ways that we are thinking about that today is just how conversation is such an important way of passing on knowledge in so many cultures, but particularly for the Indigenous people who have occupied this corner of Turtle Island since before we recorded time. So we want to acknowledge that that is where we are today. My guest is the fantastic tenor and a very good friend of mine, Asitha Tennekoon. How are you doing today, Asitha?
Good, Jen. Thank you for having me and for setting up this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to this.
It is my pleasure. So you have been very busy working in a lot of different cities, singing a lot of opera recently, and that is just a wonderful thing. And you're involved in so many great projects. We're going to talk about a few of them. And I just wanted to ask, first of all, how did you like being in my old home city of Edmonton for Edmonton Opera?
Um, it was really. I've only ever been there for work in the winter, and you know what Edmonton winters can be like. Um, and but it's a really before I had even been to Edmonton, I had no idea about how vibrant and artistic scene it had there, and especially the theater circuit too, which hopefully the next time I get to be out there, there'll be more going on, and also there'll be I'll have more chances, rather, is what I mean to say. I'll have more chances to kind of take stuff in. But it's a really it's a cool city.
It has the best fringe festival in Canada. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be in town at some point while the festival's on. So
It's pretty amazing. And tell us a little bit more about Amplified Opera.
Amplified Opera was initially started by Ari Yamazawa and Teaka Sahara, who then a couple of years after they kind of um, got this off the ground, invited Marion Newman and myself to be co-founders with them. And this was in February of 2020. Um, at which point, we were like, okay, cool. We want to get together. We want to have conversations, and we want to do stuff. And then March of 2020 happened. Um, but I think one of the good things that came out of that was it gave us a lot of time to talk about what it was that kind of drew the four of us together towards each other, what resonated, and how we wanted to mindfully approach artistic curation and artistic creation and what that meant. Um, for us as an organization, how did we want to approach those processes in a mindful way and in a different way than what we were used to as artists ourselves? And that was kind of how that's been that journey. We've done a couple of concert series now, and we're just in the middle of a process of developing a new opera with Deantha Edmonds. And so it's a really, for me personally, it's a really wonderful way to learn more about what it is to put the people who are actually developing the art at the center of the conversation, as opposed to putting the quote unquote product at the middle of the conversation. You allow those relationships, and you allow the you facilitate the spaces where the relationship is at the center, and you let the work come out of that.
And how are you seeing, like, what are the fruits of that? What are the fruits of that different approach? Because we're so accustomed to big companies and costume department, stage department, diction department, chorus training, orchestra, and then there's development team and those kind of things. It's a kind of an older business model. So how are you seeing that kind of change?
Yeah, and when it comes to organizations that size too, I think part of the part of the advantage we have is as a smaller organization, we get to we're a little more flexible. I think when you talk about the larger companies and those different departments, those are all so important and so integral to how everything comes together. I would say that the one thing I have learned through our work that might be applied there is making sure this sounds really, really basic, but I think it's something that kind of misses the point sometimes. Making sure that there are really good grounds laid out for communication and for meaningful communication and for how we agree at the beginnings of different processes how we choose to work together and making sure we're clear on that, but also reinforcing as projects move along too, that we're moving forward keeping in mind the things we agreed to and how we want to communicate with each other and how we want to work.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And near the start of the interview, I kind of like to ask some fun questions, some
Okay.
rapid fire questions.
Here we
So
go.
you have to answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Oh gosh, okay.
Berlioz or Bizet?
Bizet for my own performance. Anyway, this is rapid fire. I can't go into detail. Bizet.
Bizet.
Yeah.
Verdi or Puccini?
Puccini.
Oh, good choice. Very good choice. So we like to kind of throw out some fun questions. And another rapid fire question. After a concert, if you don't have a performance very soon the next day, wine or beer?
Wine.
Okay.
Wine. I think on any day, I'll take wine over beer. There are certain beers, like I'm not a huge beer drinker, and there are a couple of types of beer I will have, but even then, I think my first go-to would be wine. Of those two choices.
That's great. And what we have some young singers that kind of tune into our podcast. What is your vocal routine on the day of a recital or performance?
I think on the whole, it depends. It depends on what my voice is doing on that day and how I've been preparing leading up to it too. Um, I'd say the most important thing for me is getting some rest the night before. Um, and by some rest, I mean get a good night's sleep. Um, and I, yeah, I'll just take the time. I think more than the singing part, more than the vocal warm-up part, my routine would include making sure I do some sort of mindfulness exercise that gets me in my body and helps me understand, okay, this is where my body's at right now. It helps me get a gauge of whether I'm tired, how tired am I, what would make most sense for me to go forward with now. And it's the same with the vocal warm-up stuff too. I start really easy, just don't even like think about any pitches or anything like that to start with. I just see what my voice naturally wants to do on the day and then go from there, depending on what it is I need it to do later.
Mhm. So maybe even just a gentle lip trill.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And I think something I've started doing in the last couple of years is noticing when I am warming up on the day of a performance, I tend to start feeling that sort of high breath because of nerves or because I'm having a little bit of anxiousness around, how is this going to go, and thinking about the concert and the performance and stuff like that. So take even at those moments, not trying to push through and saying, okay, I just need to slow down the breath. Let's stop the lip trills. Let's stop the singing for a bit. Let's just not get the breath under control. I think I don't like that idea of feeling of getting something under control. I think it's making it just meeting, letting your mind and your body find a meeting place first, um, and working with each other. I think instead
very
of
cool.
asking one thing to take control of the other, it's like figuring out, okay, how are we gonna work together today?
That's very cool. So, speaking of things that were born during the pandemic, it was July 2021, I recall, when I had my first Zoom call with composer Ian Poussin about a song cycle. And we didn't know like what direction it's going to take, which texts would be chosen whatsoever. It was very much up in the air. And initially the thought was to pick writers who identify as a woman or Indigenous. And both of us got pretty busy with projects. And so it sort of sat for a while. And again, sometimes that time can lead to really cool things because now, Asita, we have texts by Michael and Daje for your May 12th concert with us, with our very dear artist in residence, Mr. Leslie Dalla. And this is super cool because what do you and Michael and Daje have in common?
Well, Michael is of Sri Lankan heritage, and yeah, I was born and raised in Sri Lanka as well. So, and we also, I think, I, I should know this off the top of my head. I think before he moved from Sri Lanka as a boy when he was younger. I think he went to the same school that I went to.
Wow.
I think. I shouldn't be saying that without checking this out, but I'll look it up later. Um, and yeah, so that was a really yeah, it was a really cool project to be asked to be on board with. So.
And we're just so happy that it's going to be you and Les interpreting text and melodies and music. And I think it's a very special opportunity. Um, Sri Lanka is not a very big country and it's close to some very big, powerful world states. What makes Sri Lankan culture distinct? Like, if you were to differentiate Sri Lanka from other places nearby, like, what should we know about Sri Lanka?
Oh my gosh. For me, I mean, the things that are coming just to the top of my head are the usual things that you would think about, like that people would say is like the people are really wonderful, the place is just beautiful. There's so much diversity of landscape just within a couple of hours of each other too. I think for me, what really sticks out is that sense of no matter what happens, life goes on, and there's a certain resilience to that. But the way I connect that with the culture I grew up in and with Sri Lankan culture in general is that idea of no matter what happens, we're still going to enjoy life. No matter what happens, we're going to find a way to laugh about this. No matter what happens, we're going to find a way to have fun through this. So that is, I think, what I would one of the key characteristics I would associate with my experience of growing up there.
Does that pervasive joy show up in what we're going to hear on May 12th?
Yes, and I have to like backtrack a little bit and say this is just a really cool opportunity, and thank you for um, commissioning this cycle too, because Ian and I had a few conversations about wanting to do this together. Because obviously I love his music, and so we were working on a different project a few years ago, and I was like, Ian, I would love to sing something um, that if you want to write something for me, like that would be a dream come true. And then we started chatting about the cinnamon peeler, about this poem, and so that's where the kind of the idea for this kind, came out from those conversations that we had. So that's really cool. Anyway, um, sorry, Jen, what was the question you asked me?
Do we hear that sort of pervasive, resilient joy?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of there's a lot of joy in the sense of, I mean, we're calling the evening "Songs of Desire" is the overarching theme, and
Mhm.
these are very um, sensual love poems by Michael Ondaatje, and uh, there's um, there's a lot of, when you talk about joy in the context of these poems, for me there are so many moments of that um, overwhelming peacefulness of knowing that you are head over heels in love with this person or in love with this moment. And I think the beauty that Michael captures in the poetry that Ian brings out so brilliantly is that dichotomy of being somewhat overwhelmed by um, this positive, amazing emotion, but also in a certain sense, that is what brings you a sense of joy and peace too.
Mhm.
Um, of knowing of and there is a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Impermanence, but not in a bad way. It is that sense of knowing that this is a state of impermanence, but is beautiful and valid and valuable just for that reason.
Mhm.
So I think that's something beautiful that Michael captures. Michael has that is in the poems that Michael has created that Ian captures so beautifully well.
That's fabulous. I really, really can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
So this kind of actually leads really well to my next question is how do you develop a relationship with the text that you're singing?
I like to read through the poems, definitely. But I also am careful before, especially because of this work being a new piece. We just got like the final um, versions of the songs this past week, and so what I try not to do is read the poems to the extent where I've created an idea of what my own reading of it is. So I read the poems and kind of get acquainted with the idea, the overarching idea of it. But then once I have the music in front of me and I've sung through it a few times, then I go back to the poetry and see how the line structure either shows up or doesn't show up in the music. What does that tell me about what the composer wants the 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 song to be and how the composer wants it to come out. Um, so yeah, and obviously I love doing a lot of research into the poets themselves. Um, and their other writing and how their other writing, how this particular piece is informed by some of their other writing. And so, especially one of the very first sort of short set that we're doing on this concert is by the composer Robert Owens to the poetry of Langston Hughes. And there's that was really, really fascinating to kind of look into and research. Obviously given the life of Langston Hughes just in and of itself, but it's beautiful poetry there as well. So that in a nutshell is kind of how I approach it.
That's great. Please remind me, is the poet Friedrich der Lieber Heinrich Heine?
Heinrich Heine, yeah.
Heinrich Heine.
Yeah.
And how does Heine and um, Andage's views of love, how are they same and how are they different?
I think the easy part to answer is how they're different in the context of these two pieces that we're doing.
Mhm.
Is that Heine's poetry is inflected with a lot of irony and a lot of it's very biting too at certain points. But obviously, this is someone who has been hurt by love in Heinrich Heine's poetry and especially Schumann's setting of it. Um, and how are they similar? That's an interesting sort of. I haven't really thought about it in those terms. Um, there's definitely a lot of imagery that Michael evokes. Um, it's in a very sort of, it is in a very literal sense, the imagery he evokes is he's talking about what is there, but the way he describes it is very, um, he describes it in a very it's led by the emotion of what he's describing as opposed to describing the thing itself. And I think um, Heine uses a lot of imagery as well. There's a lot of yeah, there's a whole bunch of imagery there, and I think the way they use imagery is the way I would say that they depend on imagery. The level to which they depend on imagery is somewhat similar, even though their treatment of imagery is, in many ways, very different. So,
What can our audience expect in terms of a journey during Dichterliebe? I think some members of the audience will be familiar with this cycle,
mhm.
a very well-known cycle, but for some folks, this will be their first time hearing a full German romantic song cycle.
Right.
Me, I'm here for like, I'll hear this the rest of my life and be very happy. So what can they expect from a big German romantic cycle like Dichterliebe?
Yeah. I think what my association with that cycle has been so far in in the past has been very much informed by other interpretations of it, which is, there's this person who was in love, and well, he still, I think, is in love, but he has basically um, the person he loves and he are not together anymore. And so there's a lot of bitterness there that very much is how I had seen it being portrayed in recordings I'd heard and in certain performances of it I've seen. For me, this time around, what's really different about that is that it's someone going through the steps of the grieving process, but finds the end of it isn't him just being bitter. The end of it is him finding a way through and forward into reconciling that pain and reconciling. To me, my reading of it is him finding a place where he can say, I have to come to terms with this. This is how things are.
Mhm.
And the beginnings of healing is kind of, especially that last piano. It's one of the most beautiful things in all of I would say all of Western classical music. Um, is him finding himself at the beginnings of that journey of healing.
Mhm. A lot different than Schubert's not so happy conclusions to his song cycles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness me. I would love to talk about your time with Musica Intima on the Nagamo tour with my good friend Andrew Belfour and our colleagues and friends at Musica Intima just down the street. um,
Yeah.
what was that like, and how special was that to have Andrew with you for those performances?
It was the tour was so transformational for me in the sense of I mean Andrew's such a wonderful human being. I mean obviously amazing musician, wonderful composer, just knows how to write for voice so well too. And his reframing of a lot of the Renaissance pieces that he grew up with and the way he flipped the narrative to make it more about indigenous culture and indigenous uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
Identity, indigenous identity.
well, no, it was what is considered sacred about indigenous culture,
Mhm.
um, and to have him on the tour put all of that into perspective with the different groups that we worked with, and see how that shifted um, those groups, but also us. Each place we went to, um, the big thing for me personally was being able to, because this was something he really wanted, was that we wouldn't be going and just performing this for them or working with them and telling them what to do. It would be a dialogue. It would be us working together with those groups as well, with the pieces having some conversation around them so that we were learning as well. Because how that information and how different groups approach things are obviously going to be different. Um, and so that really is what struck me about this tour was being able to go and not just go around and sing in these different cities, but also have that many learning experiences with the folks we were working with. Was really, really, really cool.
That sounds like it was a very wonderful trip on all accounts, artistically and just like as human development. And
Mm.
that was great. We're going to end with rapid fire questions as well.
Oh boy.
Parsifal or Tristan?
Oh gosh. I'd have to go with Tristan. I don't know Parsifal that well. I'm not a huge Wagner person. Don't tell Les. But
Are you listening?
um, I'm not big into Wagner. I think there's obviously amazing, wonderful music. It's just not something I ever really got into. But Tristan I know, and Parsifal I don't know that well.
Okay. And who are some of the tenors that have been people you've looked up to?
Oh, I love listening to Larry Brownlee, of course. Um, I Leopold Simonon, um,
Mm-hmm.
and Wunderlich, obviously. Björling, beautiful, beautiful voice. Gedda sometimes, depending on the repertoire. Yeah, there's yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wunderlich is just, for me, so special. Yeah, just
Yeah,
wonderful interpreter and such artistic integrity in all of his recordings. I
absolutely. Yeah.
adore them. And I would go with Tristan too because of that funky chord.
Yeah.
But like you, I'm not the most knowledgeable or into Wagner,
Right.
but some productions can be pretty impressive, including our friends at the Vancouver Opera who are doing
Yeah.
Singer von Nuremberg
That
next week.
oh, Dutchman, Flying Dutchman.
Is it a Flying Dutch? It is a Flying Dutchman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless unless they're doing Meistersinger on the off nights. So
Oh, that would be huge. Oh, both of these are sizable productions, people.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Rome was not built in a day. Well, Asita, it has been so great to speak with you and to gain some insight into your creative process and the projects you've been working on lately. And we are so excited to hear this world premiere of music by Ian Cusson. Salut Ian, si tu es là et tu nous entends. And just to hear how this text has been brought to musical life. And I remember reading some of Ondaatje's works in high school and university. So definitely an author who's had an impact on me. And I love reading and writing. So this is such a combination of two amazing worlds. It is truly an honor and a privilege to help put this little project into motion. The little
Thank
song
you.
cycle that
Yeah.
could.
No, thank you so much. And honestly, it's like Les and I met up yesterday, and one of the things that Les said after we ran through the pieces was, "What a gift! What an absolute gift!" And I can't agree more. It's just a beautiful, yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful gift. And yeah, thank you for facilitating all of that.
On that note, we would like to thank the Canada Council for their support of the commission and for today's podcast. And we are really grateful. Everybody, in case you forgot the date of the concert, it's Friday, May 12th at the Annex, which is on Seymour at Robson. Very convenient for all locations of Vancouver to take transit and not have to get in their car on Earth Day. So we want to thank Asita again for being here, and we will see everyone at the concert. Merci. This is Jennifer West for Take Note. Have a great day.